So I just finished up season 1 of The Rings of Power, and it's just bad. There's no getting around the fact that the show is just pretty terrible overall. Now, I want to preface this video by saying I am not a media critic. I am not somebody that sits down and watches a TV show for the sole purpose of picking it apart. I'm pretty easy to please. For example, I can enjoy a Transformers movie. I know it's going to be stupid, the plot's going to be dumb, the writing is going to be bad in a lot of ways, but it's a fun movie where robots fight. I'm for it. I can enjoy even things like the Warcraft movie. I kind of enjoyed that movie. I'm not a critic, but Rings of Power is just bad. And especially when you put it into the context of what this show was supposed to be. Let's just use some numbers here. Return of the King, the 4-hour extended cut edition, arguably one of the best movies ever, easily one of the best Lord of the Rings properties. That movie cost $94 million. Pretty expensive. But how much do you think Rings of Power Season 1 costs? 100 million, 200 million, 300 million? Wrong. $1 billion. They spent $1 billion on Season 1 of The Rings of Power. And it is not even comparable loosely to the greatness of Return of the King. And it's over 10 times the price. There is hardly anything redeemable about this show at all, much less comparing it to something that was a tenth of the cost. The show is genuinely so bad, it's unbelievable. If somebody would have told me as a child that they were going to create a Lord of the Rings TV show where each episode had the budget of Return of the King, and the show not only was bad, but it was boring, and you almost had a hard time watching each episode and couldn't stay off your phone, I wouldn't have believed you. The show, it's unreal how boring it is. And that's probably the biggest criticism of the show, is that nothing happens. And they tease you. Like, at the end of every episode, you're like, oh boy, something's going to happen next episode. I'm sure of it. And it doesn't. Every episode is like that, with the exception of one. There is one episode where the orcs attack a village and they defend the village, and it's a pretty good episode of Lord of the Rings television. That is a passable episode, but that's the only one, and it's not some masterpiece. This isn't like the Battle of Helm's Deep, or this is the worst Lord of the Rings battle in the history of Lord of the Rings media, but at least something happened. And oh my God, dude, when that episode came out, people were like, oh, finally, the show is doing something. Thank God. But then no, then they're just back to just doing nothing. When you compare Rings of Power to House of the Dragon, it's not even comparable. House of the Dragon is a show that actually moves. They skip forward 20 years. There's not really any lingering in that show. And all of Lord of the Rings is just lingering, dude. Nothing happens. And what's funny is they call the show The Rings of Power, but the only time the Rings of Power are actually relevant in the show is literally like the last 2 minutes of the final episode. And nothing happens with them. You just kind of see them. There is nothing memorable about anything that happens in this show. Everything is forgettable. I didn't laugh or chuckle ever. There is not a single funny line, moment, anything. Now, I obviously don't watch Lord of the Rings for comedy, but at least the original trilogy had some funny moments, some quotable lines. Nothing. There's not a goddamn thing here. Now, there's some redeeming qualities of this show. They spent $1 billion on it, and they hired a bunch of CGI artists, and it looks good. The show looks good. Seeing Numenor and the Dwarven cities on the big screen and seeing these things visualized is cool. That's cool. The Warcraft movie did that. It was cool seeing Stormwind and Ironforge and things like that. I like that. I think everybody kind of likes that. Durin, the dwarf, he's cool. And that's it. That's it. That's the only redeeming things of the show. It looks good. Numenor, cool. And Durin, kind of cool. That's it. That's the show, bro. 8 episodes. Honestly, it's hard to even tell you what really happened because it just wasn't much. Bitch jumped off a boat, met a guy. Guy wasn't who he said he was. They found a fucking rock. with the elves, and that's it. Like, that's fucking it. How dumb. That's $1 billion. $1 billion. 10 times the budget of Return of the King. That's what you got. Sorry I ruined it for you if you guys hadn't seen it. Yeah, that's what happens. So, Rings of Power, fucking terrible. Maybe they pull it together for season 2. I don't know. It's just the whole show is just a big pile of nothing. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to subscribe with notifications on. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and join the Discord. It's free.